My book is about the concentration camp of Ravensbrück, which was the only concentration camp built specifically for women by the Nazis. It opened in 1939, and in the early days it had women from all over Germany and a few women from Austria. They were mostly political prisoners, communists, social democrats, other people who had opposed the regime, as well as women that were called asocials. These were women who were often picked up off the streets. They were homeless, they were prostitutes, they were poor women who were not wanted in the Third Reich. In the early days, the treatment of women was slightly less severe than in some of the men's camps. Some of the extremes of torture were not quite so physically abhorrent, although they were certainly bad enough. As time went past and the camp became more overcrowded, many of those tortures and deprivations were just as severe at the men's camps. I think probably what struck me deepest was meeting some of the Russian Red Army women who'd been in the camp. This was because they had really never told their story before, so when I was talking to them it was like talking to people for the very first time. But by the time I met them, they were very old women and they were absolutely wonderful. They lived in, many of the ones I met lived in houses on the shores of the Black Sea, and they were terribly welcoming, and they fed me and gave me food and told me stories, and their children would gather around to listen because their children had also not heard their grandmother or their mother speak before. Well, I think I uncovered a lot of new detail about the medical experiments, for example. One of the many ways in which the women here were abused was they were used as guinea pigs in appalling medical experiments. There were the women called the rabbits, who were Polish, young Polish students who were butchered by SS doctors who were looking for ways of curing wounds on the battlefield of German soldiers, and they created battlefield conditions by butchering these women's legs. But in a way, what was most moving about that was I also discovered quite a lot about the way they got the information out to the West. They smuggled letters out using their own urine as secret ink, a trick they'd learnt as Girl Scouts at school, and they managed to do this, and the information got out to London and indeed to the Red Cross in Geneva. It was absolutely essential to me that I had the voices of survivors while it was still possible to find them. And I was lucky, there were still a lot of women around in their mid-80s and even their early 90s who were still alive and ready to talk to me. I had to find them. That wasn't easy. I found them through associations in the different countries who kept records of the survivors in those countries. And this led me to women all over Europe and even further afield than that. Siemens had a very large factory just outside the walls of Ravensbrück, and they employed women to make electrical equipment for the German Luftwaffe, for German military, and for electrical installations all over the camps. They employed a small number here to begin with, but it was very successful because women prisoners were very good at the kind of work they wanted, which was using nimble fingers and to make small electrical parts. And by the end of the camp, they were employing more than 2,000 people here. Those who found it exhausting and they were hungry and they were starving, they were returned to the main camp, where many of them then, like the rest of the prisoners who no longer of any use, were sent off in the final months to be gassed or to be shot. Many of them died out from starvation or in other ways from sickness.